just gonna hit record and we're gonna go. And whatever happens, happens. Let's go. We're gonna start by organizing the video.
Social media is my hobby and also my job. I'm all the way up and going into a shoulder press.
We're gonna organize the video. We're gonna organize the video. And then
While doing a core exercise, flip over into a forward roll and then lift her legs up.
we're gonna start moving. Things are just gonna happen.
Look at her face. She is distraught. She is scared. I would be crying.
Man, I'm cozy.
Training worked out because she was fast enough, she was strong enough, and then at the end, she was caring enough.
I want to clean this room today. I want to film the video today. I want to work it today. And then I also need to wash my hair. This is how procrastination happens. Okay, let's get serious.
It's a life full of hope. It's a life full of joy. No more fear in my corner. I'm already fulfilled.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of A Life Full of Joys, where I share about love, joy, peace, and freedom until your cup runneth over. Whether you are a returning viewer or it's your first time here, don't forget to click on the subscribe button and also on the notification bell so that next time, you won't have to stumble upon me. You'll just receive a notification. On multiple occasions, I've spoken about being self-centered, how everyone is self-centered, and how most people usually do it in the wrong way. Well, today we're going to talk exactly about this. Follow me. Through today's video, we will be covering 3 different types of self-centeredness, and we'll go through a bunch of other stuff before we get there. Just look at the outline right there. So point number 1, what do I mean when I say self-centered? When having any type of conversation, it is important for us to define the words that we use. For example, in this conversation, when I'm talking about being self-centered, I mean being self-motivated. I mean putting yourself as one of your top priorities, if not your top priority. But what do you hear when you hear the word self-centered? Usually people get very triggered by this word, but why? Well, first and foremost, as mentioned in the previous video, whenever we discuss and have conversations with people, we usually filter everything through our own experiences and our own perspective. Matter of fact, we rarely see raw objective reality. So people get triggered by this word, self-centered, because we experience or perceive everything through our experience. And even when we think about this word self-centered as a collective, it usually refers to something negative. Some synonyms would be selfish or inconsiderate. Someone that we call self-centered is someone who disregards everyone else and only cares about themselves. But there are different types of self-centered people. And a concept that I thought would help us a lot understand about those different types is the beautiful concept of boundary. Every time I bring up the topic of boundaries, I feel like someone is going to come out from under my bed and drag me. So what are boundaries? Boundaries define what is acceptable and what is not in a relationship. There are different styles of boundaries, and you would have guessed it, it's mainly 3. On one end of the spectrum, you have a person with rigid boundaries who don't let anything in or out. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have someone with what we call porous boundaries who basically doesn't have any boundaries at all. And right in the middle, you have people with healthy boundaries who allow things in, but in a controlled manner. Maybe in another video, we'll address more this concept of boundaries. But for today, that's all you need to know in order to understand how that relates to self-centeredness. So let's go ahead and discuss those three different types of self-centered and try to understand what kind of person we should be when I say that you should be self-centered.
As per usual, I am not Wikipedia nor ChatGPT, although even ChatGPT is not that reliable. But what I'm trying to say is that everything I'm saying here is mainly based on my general knowledge and my opinion.
Starting with type 1, which is again something that I made up, the self-preserving extremist. So this person would be related to the rigid boundaries. When it comes to this type of person, they perceive themselves as the belly button of the entire universe. They're like Cyclops with their one eye stuck inside of their belly button, facing the inside of the belly button, and the belly button in itself becomes the rigid boundary around it. That's the self-centered that we usually think about. This type is the one that usually comes off as arrogant and tends to believe that they know better than everyone else. They usually place their thoughts, their emotions, their beliefs, intellectually, morally, emotionally, all of the leaves above that of everyone else. They are the inconsiderate type that we usually fear when we hear the word self-centered. They care very little, if at all, about others unless it serves them. Am I describing myself? Nah. You know that horrible friend that always wants to talk about themselves but never has time to listen to you? You know that horrible friend that always calls you for help but is never there when you need them? Yeah, that one. The thing to be careful about when it comes to this kind of people, or even when it comes to ourselves identifying as that kind of person, is that this kind of self centered person doesn't always come off as arrogant and full of themselves as we might think. Matter of fact, if you do relate to that kind of person, you might not even fully know that you're self centered. This kind of person might always come to you for help and be quite unavailable when you need help from them. However, even if you do call them out and bring up your concerns, they will still encourage you to come to them, to confide in them, so that I think it's so that they can feel as though they are helping you. At the end of the day, this kind of person will rarely reciprocate, if ever. And if they do, they will be overly conscious of everything that they do for you, every minute that they give you, because they're continuously trying to preserve themselves as if they were going to run out of resources or out of fear of losing control. In other words, this kind of person will always focus on themselves even when they are looking at others. This is the self preserving extremist. On the other end of the spectrum, we have type number 2, the overgiving person or overgiving puppy. Okay, I won't be calling them a puppy the whole time. But the reason why I called them puppy as well is because they remind me of the type 2 in the Enneagram, which is also called as the dog personality. I do have an Enneagram app on my phone, so I'll just put some screenshots of the description of the dog personality and I'll read some main points to you. So, some of the key points are survival depends on the love and approval of significant others. Being connected in relationship is the main focus, primary concern. There is an emphasis on what others need and helping the important cause or person. And this type can end up being overextended, dependent, or manipulative. Other characteristics as well are that it is the most purely interpersonal of all the types, and they tend to lack self identity. They define the self by what they do for others. They seek to secure connection and can be boundaryless and codependent. They feel controlled by others' needs. They seek approval and avoid rejection. And giving for them is usually manipulative. They give in order to get, and they are often unaware of this. They tend to overgive and they get angry when it's not reciprocated. And they also package hostility as love. And lastly, they tend to overextend themselves physically, financially, and emotionally. So, as mentioned in the characteristics of the dog type, this type of personality usually tends to be boundaryless, which is why it's going to be related to the porous boundaries or almost absent boundaries. Although on the surface, this person can seem very eager to help, everything that they do comes at a cost. For example, they might give in order to receive praise, status, or gain control. They usually would do good deeds or good things for others, not for the sake of care, but rather for the sake of recognition. Some other thing that they might do is volunteering personal information or do what we call emotional dumping in order to forcefully bond with someone. So, as you would know, whenever someone does something for you or tells you something, there is that sense of reciprocity. I need to pay it back. Well, when they do those kind of things, they're not doing this because they genuinely want to share something with you, but rather because they're trying to quickly, forcefully bond with you. To be honest, I used to be this kind of person when I was younger. And this is why I know very well about the tactics that this kind of people can use. If ever you do relate to this kind of personality, it is not wrong for you to realize where you are, but now you need to decide what you're going to do from here on out. At the end of the day, when it comes to this kind of personality is also self centered. However, it is a self centeredness that is a little bit more covert than the first type that we talked about. When I used to be this kind of person, my quest in life was to find someone who was able to pour into me in the same way that I used to pour into others, which is without a sense of limit. I used to believe that pouring into others in that way was the morally righteous thing to do, and that whoever wasn't willing to meet me there was actually uncaring and cold. This was a very lonely place to be in. And in the end, I did encounter some people who took advantage of that as well. It's very interesting because people who are self preserving usually don't mesh well with people who have healthy boundaries, just like people who are overgiving might also clash with people who have healthy boundaries. It's the same dynamic as the avoidant and the anxiously attached person. So, compared to the first type, who only saw themselves even when they looked at others, this type, the overgiving person, will only look at others, but it will be so that others will look at them. So now we've seen the first two types, which are the two extremes. But do understand that all the three types that we are covering exist on a spectrum, meaning that even though you might have a predisposition for one of those types, you might very well fluctuate between all of the different types. Also, as mentioned earlier, if you do identify with any of those extremes, that's okay, but do decide what you're going to do from then on. If you have opened your eyes, it's not for you to go back to sleep. You're up now. But yes, not everyone will fall under the self preserving extremist or the overgiving person. So, for the last type that we are going to cover today, I will call it
Come on. Think. Brain blast!
the healthy self centered. If you're disappointed with this label, just imagine that I stuck with my initial idea, which was picture perfect. But why would I call the healthy self centered picture perfect? Is because this person has a main focal point, but they are also able to see clearly everything surrounding that main focal point, creating a perfect picture. If I try to reformulate that, the healthy self centered person will have themselves as a priority. But a priority doesn't mean that they are the only thing or only person that they care about. It means that on a list, they're always going to be at the top of that list. So that doesn't even mean that they would necessarily always be the number one, but that would mean that they would always be at the top of the list. That would mean that they would always be either the focus or in the periphery of their focus. They never forget about themselves. For example, I would never put 50 things above myself on my list of priority and just completely disregard myself. And even if I did have 50 things above myself on that list of priority, is it really disregarding myself? Perhaps another thing that we could bring to the table is the fact that the perspective that you have is very important. There is someone who, for example, will put their boss above everything else because they want to please their boss so much. But there is someone who will put their boss above everything else because of their own interest. So if you think about it this way, my boss is the one who pays my paycheck, and I have decided to do at least this much in order to be in my boss's good graces. Personally, I don't feel like I'm disregarding myself. I'm doing it for a clear purpose. Which brings me to the concept of sacrifice. Even when you think about the self preserving extremist and the overgiving person, they both will push the idea that sacrifice is morally righteous. However, there are two things to keep in mind when it comes to sacrifice. Number one, sacrifice is based on context. And number two, the concept of true sacrifice applies to a very small area of things. First of all, with sacrifice being about context, some people, when you start having healthy boundaries, will try to use and abuse you and manipulate you into thinking you're a bad person, which is why we usually associate having healthy boundaries with a villain era. But the thing about sacrifice is not just the fact that you have sacrificed something, is the fact that you have done it willingly. Am I wrong? Therefore, you cannot guilt trip somebody into sacrificing. That removes the concept of sacrifice from the equation. And when it comes to sacrifice, a lot of things don't demand sacrifice, it simply demands a compromise. In regular relationships, why do you need to continuously sacrifice? You should find a compromise. This is a relationship. A relationship built on continuous sacrifices, I don't know how that can work really. Don't get me wrong, it is possible for you to do a lot for someone and for someone to be grateful to you for what you do, but it shouldn't be that you're continuously doing things that you don't necessarily want to do or things that are detrimental to you for the sake of the relationship. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm the one that doesn't make sense, but do you understand what I'm saying? Look, even when you're trying to attain success, you are sacrificing, right, in order to attain a certain goal. But if you never reach success, what are you see what I'm saying? This is not a lifestyle. This is something for a purpose. You see what I'm saying? I don't know. Anyways, let me know. Let me know in the comments below. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. But let me know in the comments. I believe that most relationships shouldn't be based on sacrifice. Even if we don't see eye to eye, it should be compromise. Rather than sacrifice being the norm in the relationship, we should know how to communicate and find a compromise, find a way for everyone to be happy with what is going on. That doesn't sound very sustainable. But yes, the reason why I'm saying this is because in the midst of a relationship, you cannot guilt trip someone into continuously sacrificing for your sake. That doesn't make sense. As I said, it removes the point of sacrifice to begin with. On the other hand, when it comes to true sacrifice only applies to a very small area of things. I'll take a Christian example, such as going to heaven. Sometimes people say that they are sacrificing in order to go to heaven. I will be very honest. To me, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it make sense is because are you going to heaven for somebody else? Like sometimes I feel like people are acting like I am trying to have this good thing for somebody else. It's for you. It's for you. I'm not saying that it cannot be difficult. I'm sorry, but if there is a benefit for you, it doesn't fall under the topic of sacrifice. This is your choice. This is your decision. I understand how we use the word sacrifice in this situation, but it's not really a sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice. Let me look up sacrifice. Maybe is it me? Maybe it's me. Hmm.
Tiptoe through the window, by the window, that is where I'll be. Come tiptoe through the tulips with me.
Okay, I stand corrected. So I see that the definition of sacrifice would be the act of giving up something valued for the sake of something else regarded as more important or worthy. Now, what I mean when I'm thinking about sacrifice, I'm thinking about if you choose to do so, it is not a sacrifice because there is that, yes, that's where it was coming from, because there is that side of that morally righteous thing to sacrifice where I'm like, it's not necessarily morally righteous for you to do something which in the end is still serving you. So it's more in that way. Now in my head. And I feel like I need to process this more in depth. Okay, I got extremely sidetracked here, so I'll just make a voiceover. But the reason why I went into explaining about sacrifice was to address the idea that by being a healthy, self centered person, you are able to take ownership over your decisions and also feel free about what you decide to do. I will try to make another video about boundaries more specifically, but those who don't have healthy boundaries, whether they're rigid or porous, tend to feel as though people are trying to or are easily manipulating them. Being a healthy, self centered person or someone with healthy boundaries allows you to continuously check in with yourself whenever you're making a decision. Now, in regards to sacrifice not being necessarily righteous or not being something that can be forced upon you, if you're able to understand this, it allows you to be more free in your decision making process as you're less likely to be seeking recognition. And it also allows you more freedom as you do not see yourself living under the coercion of other people around you, but rather you see yourself living grounded within yourself. But, anyways, I kind of got sidetracked. But all of this to me is because I take a lot of ownership over what I do. Therefore, to me, I don't do things unless I've chosen to do them. I feel as though I cannot be forced to do something. If I'm doing something, even if it's not pleasant, it's because I've chosen to do that. And you get to that point by being someone who is able to keep yourself as your main focal point. So there might be times when you focus on other things, other people, you prioritize other things, other people, but yourself is always in the top priorities. Yourself is always the home base, the focus that you return to at the end of the day. You are the home base. This here is your home base. Anyways, there's so much that could be said, but I actually made a pact with myself that these videos are never going to go past 30 minutes. So we're going to stop here for today. In conclusion, we got to cover 3 different types of self-centered person. Number 1, someone who is more focused on self-preservation and therefore focuses only on themselves. Number 2, someone who is seeking more connection and therefore will focus on other people in hopes of establishing a connection with those people. And number three, the type of self centered person who is focused on themselves, but is also able to be open to others as well. So, when it comes to healthy self centeredness, it does not mean that you shouldn't care about others. On the contrary, you should fully acknowledge how others are also connected to you and care for yourself and care for others as an extension of yourself as well. We could put it this way. This is all for today's video. If you have been doing anything else in order to be a properly self-centered person, do not hesitate to write it down in the comments below. If you want to start this whole debate about sacrifice in the comments as well, I'm very open. I'm very open and I'm willing to change my mind. My grandfather used to say, only idiots don't change their mind. Okay, you're going to change your mind at least once a day. So let's do it. Otherwise, thank you for sticking all the way through the end. I always appreciate good company, and I will be seeing you in the next one. Until then, whether you overextend or underextend or extend just enough, remember, nevertheless, it is a life full of joy.
It's a life full of hope. It's a life full of joy. No more fear in my corner.
We
I'm
fought
already fulfilled.
and we won. We fought and we overcame, because if y'all knew what day it is that I'm filming this video, I don't think I should tell y'all.